I do. On page 3 of the minutes, about halfway down the page, we will organize the report next meeting, June 23rd, and ask to present at June 11th, which I imagine should be July 11th. And that's the correction that I'm aware of.
Good catch.
So Peter, who would be taking, who would make that correction? You want to make sure that?
Yeah, I can make that correction.
Okay, if you can make the correction,
So
that'd be
June
great.
to July.
You
Is
wanna
that
see
the
it?
July 11th city council meeting?
Yes.
Pardon me?
Oh, okay.
It says or later for more time needed.
Page 3.
Page 3.
Yeah, it's right down. They had June 11th in there.
Great, okay, thank you.
So motion to accept the minutes as corrected.
Amended.
Amended.
Second.
So moved.
All right, first up, we have the middle school recommendation letter. So you guys back there, we just kind of wanted to bring you guys in to kind of hear about the project you were doing. We all got to read what you guys, they got sent to city council and then they got sent to us, which is super cool. I mean, me personally from the high school, I did read them, I shared them with the club and stuff. So we kind of just wanted to invite you guys in and, because we did really appreciate them and hear more about like what you guys were doing and all that stuff.
Would you like to introduce project?
So we were asked to create some kind of sustainable solution for Portsmouth to help
It was tied to our electricity. What is it that you had to propose in terms of the way that the city generates or uses electricity?
the sustainable way to the solution,
But
a sustainable way to use electricity for Portsmouth.
So, I'm their 8th grade science teacher, and this was, I think, the 3rd year that I've asked students to do this. So we spend a lot of time learning about climate change, and obviously one of the biggest impactors on our climate is our production of our energy system, and a pretty antiquated energy grid at this point. It's in the infrastructure bill, we know that it needs to change, but they were asked not only to present, and I think you all read this, their understanding of human-induced climate change. That was the learning target. But to act like a civic electrical engineer, I guess I would say. So they wrote, I found an energy proposal online and tried to tailor it to be specific to our locality. So I wanted them to understand that it needs to start as a smaller solution before we can think as nationally what needs to change. So, I know that both of them are being quiet and modest, but I could have afforded 25 different proposals that I thought were realistic and were impactful. But I tried to narrow the scope, and both of them, I think each of you worked with a different partner on it.
I didn't.
You did, no, you worked alone, but they could choose one other partner. And that was really difficult too, because you had to agree on it, you had to divide up the parts, you had to delegate, you had to be flexible if, your partner didn't agree exactly with what your solution was. And, I think it's frustrating because in the 3rd year doing this, every year, students say, why are we doing this? The city's not gonna do anything, and I tell them, what do I say at the beginning of the year my goal is for science? It's to
To be more involved in it.
Well, and to study real things, and this was a real opportunity, but it's frustrating because I think students believe that their ideas aren't going to go anywhere, and I hate to be the realist, but I walk around downtown Portsmouth and I don't see the level of impact that I know this committee and it sounds like the city wants to make. Like you see all of these new, I think it's Amalia's idea to put on all these new housing developments, mandatory solar arrays, and yet you still don't see any of that. So I can understand their frustration as a citizen, as science teacher. I feel the same frustration that we're just, seem to be very slow moving. One of the things that they also had to do is research what other cities or other countries are doing to invest in renewables. And you read about Amsterdam, and you read about places in Scotland and Germany that are further north than Portsmouth, New Hampshire, that are making bigger investments than we are. So I understand their frustration and their belief that, what, Mr. Rhodes, this really isn't gonna do anything. So that was kind of the impetus of, I think this is the second round that I've sent to the city. I didn't get any response, but I was very happy to see that it was on the agenda last month and made its way to the Blue Ribbon Committee as well.
Powerful little encouragement of what can be seen and what can't be seen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but I hear you. It sometimes can be a very slow moving thing, to see a government do anything, not just improve the environment. But I live right around the corner from the Bridge Street open air lot.
Yeah.
It was completely torn up for reasons I couldn't immediately ascertain, for only about a week, but it was completely
Yeah.
dug up. And I noticed, just because I'm nosy, speaking of holes, there's a lot of big new piping being laid 5 or 6 feet underground. Of course, three days later, it wasn't visible anymore. So I asked Josh about that, because Josh has been very involved in the electrification of the city. And rather than steal his thunder, Josh, do you mind telling me
Sure.
what you told me?
So for years, I'd been pushing as a counselor to get DC fast chargers downtown. So it takes about 30 minutes to charge a vehicle. Got it in the capital improvement plan. It fell out of the capital improvement plan after I lost the prior election. And one spot which the prior city manager wanted to put them was the Bridge Street lot. And with the most recent capital improvement plan, said, hey, I want to see DC fast chargers, went back and forth, and what we settled on as a council was spending $750,000 over the next 5 years, installing $150,000 worth of electric vehicle charging stations on public property. And that's just the first step. Now, I'm not expecting those to be DC fast chargers. They do make more sense at the library or other places. But that was laying the wiring at the lot, because it makes the most sense when you dig up a parking lot to then lay the wiring going forward. And so that's just part of the solution, which is public funding. The other part is changing our local ordinances to allow private businesses and residences to have such things like DC fast chargers and whatever else. And I have to give you guys mad props. As I said, when I was in 8th grade, I was just looking at comic books. I wasn't even reading them. And here I am now with Councilor Cook. We proposed an amendment to the zoning ordinance based on what we're allowed to do. Unfortunately, the state of New Hampshire only can do what the state specific says we're allowed to do. And one thing is encourage things like electric vehicle charging stations. So we proposed an ordinance, which is now at the planning board, which will hopefully allow electric vehicle charging stations to flourish throughout Portsmouth. And I guess one more thing I'd want to touch upon, you mentioned putting solar panels on all new developments. Unfortunately, due to state law, we're not allowed to mandate things that go beyond the current zoning code. So some states which are more progressive, like California, have adopted the most current, I don't know, it's 2021 model code, where they're mandating that new houses are oriented towards the sun, and that all roofs, they're not required to have solar, but they're required to have solar hookups ready to go. We're years behind that, and the state doesn't allow us to surpass that, but we could still do everything we can, and ideas like yours are going to go a long way. So, thank you.
I want to congratulate you girls and Chris for the work that you've done. And I think that the thing that struck me most is that we need young people like you to pick up where our aged people have determined that the return on investment for putting solar on our houses right now, us older people, will not be there. I mean, and it would be a cost that we would never recoup if we put solar on our houses. But I was particularly impressed by your presentations here to the city council. I read them all, and I couldn't pick one better than the other. But one thing I know is that you have to have patience. I've worked in sustainability on this committee or others for somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 years now. And I know it takes time, and I've made some headway with some of my ideas that I have used in my own home and recommended to the city on the Hodgson Brook area of Portsmouth. I don't know if you know where that is in Portsmouth, but it's a brook that comes out of Pease and runs into the North Mill Pond eventually under Bartlett Street. And I was on a committee that worked for the betterment of that brook because it drains about 25% of the city's runoff water from rain and et cetera. So, like I said, the one thing I want to impart on you is patience, patience, patience. It's kind of like playing golf. You can be good one day and lousy the next, but that's what'll bring you home is patience. That's all I got to say about that.
A quick question since you're here. You had the assignment and you talked to kids in class. Did either of you talk to anybody else about the project that you're researching outside of class?
So my mom is, actually she just got a new job as the assistant director, but she currently is the director at Stratham Library, library director. And her police station has solar panels, so I asked her, I wasn't able to actually get a meeting with the police chief, but I asked her to get some information about the solar panels that they had, about expenses and how often they have to replace it, how much it breaks. I wasn't able to get a lot of the information because surprisingly they didn't know much about it themselves, but I did get a whole 14 pages of just contracts that they had to sign about it and the different prices. So I read through all that and got some information about it. Yeah, I love to spend my Saturday night looking through contracts.
Yeah, my mom currently works for the people who own River House and the other restaurants, and I had personally mentioned putting solar panels on the River House, so I was like, I have to mention it for them. She hasn't done it yet. Yeah.
You want their phone number?
I had.
That was a challenge with COVID. I had the owner of Revision Energy has come in a couple times. We're under some challenges in schools the last couple of years, but it's definitely something I hope to be able to do more of, is bring some experts in to speak to students specifically about some of their ideas in the future.
Well, I'm so happy that you're here, that you shared that. And I used to teach a course on systems thinking at the university. And one of the things that happens in any system, there's unexpected consequences. And so there's usually some not so good unexpected consequences. I want to tell you about a good unexpected consequence of your being here tonight. On Tuesday of this week, I and a couple of colleagues will present a Zoom course to the Ministry of Education in Israel. We have 100 teachers of English who signed up because they want to know about sustainability content and drawdown. I am now thinking, I'm always looking how to make connections, and Chris, I don't know if something comes up, but sometimes we get Pen Pals. This could be Sustainability Pals, and you could find out what they're doing in Israel, which is really using a lot of high technology, and they could find out what we're doing here. So that might be an unexpected consequence of your taking the time to come here tonight, and I thank you.
Great job, guys.
I also wanted to highlight that when your proposals came to the council was so excited about seeing these proposals from students, because the council passed a goal. I mean, one of our strategic goals is to address, have a climate action plan and start to address sustainability measures. And you presented them to the council, and then they came to this committee, and this committee is the committee that's tasked with working on a climate action plan. So now they're thinking very actively about sustainability measures around solar in particular. In fact, right after we saw your proposals, I received questions from a few people who were interested in solar in particular, in zoning rules, in zoning, changing zoning around solar. So sometimes you spark a conversation when you submit something like that, and it makes people start to think. And what'll happen then in the course of around, I think, the next 9 months or so, because the council did fund the climate action plan process, is that this committee will start talking about that with an outside consultant and end up with a plan for the city that might say, hey, the city has to put solar, on every roof that's a city building. You never know. You never know what's gonna come out of that. But it's going to force the city to start thinking about those sustainability measures. And the fact that all the proposals that came in were about solar panels, that's gonna make us think about that very seriously. So I think that was really valuable for me to see.
I think the joy of working with these phenomenal young students is they don't think about why things can't work. They think about why it can work, and I'm an adult, and you get jaded by waiting 60 years for change. The reality is we don't have time. Like we're way past kicking this can down the road anymore. Like we're out of time, we're out of patience, and that's what's so exciting about just hearing their ideas. And I know you can't just flip a switch and now we look and there's solar panels everywhere and there's tidal turbines in the Piscataqua. Like, I understand that, but it's just refreshing for them to just think about what is possible, not the bureaucratics and the decision making and the 20-year process to get anything done. So, that's why I'm so encouraged for the futures, because the ideas that these students continually pump out year after year it's really fun to be a part of.
And Chris, if I may, one of the objectives we have on climate action plan subcommittee, which I will go more tonight, is outreach to the community. The students in this town are very much a part of the community. You get the energy, you live here, it's your future too. So we'd love to keep you involved. However, we need to do that.
Well, I can tell Darla, I know what the Eco Club accomplishes, which is a group of 25 students.
Actually, we have 100 and something kids in the club.
But how many are actively involved?
Actively showing up, 30. But
Yeah. Like I know Miss McGlinchey and what the Eco Club is able to accomplish. They're the reason there is a small solar array on the high school. They push for change at a small level that, why can't it be amped up? They've shown what's capable when you have committed young people.
Just to add to that, for 5 years, I pushed banning plastic shopping bags in Portsmouth. The only way I made progress on that my last term on the council was by enlisting the Eco Club. I reached out and said, listen, even with this council, I don't have the votes to do this. And instead we banned styrofoam cups and containers. But the mayor, former mayor Jack Blaylock, great guy. He was always proud of participating in the first Earth Day. He was understandably getting frustrated with me constantly pushing the idea of banning plastic shopping bags. But even the day of the public hearing, he was frustrated prior. But once all of the Eco Club students went and spoke, he said, hey, you are the future, and it's time to follow. So please just stay interested, stay active. because adults will listen to you. They're not gonna listen to people like me. They've made their opinions on me, but they'll listen to the youth. So,
I want to echo that, because that's what I was thinking, is thank you. Thank you for coming. I'm sure this is probably not the place you want to be on your Thursday evening.
They were so excited to see their former science teacher. I can tell you.
And join Eagle Club next year.
Yeah.
I think you've got a few recruits.
It is more fun than reviewing contracts.
And you guys can have these meetings whenever, so. Yeah, so
No,
thank you guys.
I would like to thank Darla too for making a point to invite us. It was very nice to receive her email and encouragement.
You're here.
So that was very nice to receive.
Real quick thought, like, I understand it is frustrating when you have these ideas and you say, well, why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? And then have everyone around you just say, well, there's a million reasons why we can't do this, and I hate that. It drives me nuts. These proposals, I feel like, should be a challenge to everyone on this committee to, instead of saying why we can't, what can we do to make every single one of these happen?
Right.
That should be our goal as a committee, and to push the council to do something. And for things like, solar panels on top of buildings, should be like changing ordinances and zoning. I know me and you have talked about photovoltaics already. I don't know where we are on that, but we could talk more about that. Just constantly be finding things that we can do to make this stuff happen, because that's what you want, and that's what we need, so,
And it's your future.
yeah.
Well, it's all of ours
Yeah,
collectively.
but you know what I mean in the sense
We're
of,
feeling
like-
these changes in our lifetime. It's not
Yeah.
50 years in the future, like.
Right, but I'm saying in the sense of, you should always feel empowered to use your voices, because the age or the experience doesn't change the volume of what you have to say and the importance that you put on things that you care about. Because, you're gonna live in this as well. So, middle school, high school, I find it very humbling when, I, at work and every day I'm trying to do things and I can't push them through, and then half the time, like, Josh said, a group of high school students do it better than I do. I'm like, darn it, but that's what we need to see, and it's impressive, so thank you. Been working.
Keep at it.
All right, any last comments or anything? All right, next up we have the climate action plan update. I don't know who is speaking on that one.
You want me to start? And then, okay.
Is anyone on Zoom?
There's one person,
Oh.
so, Leslie Kimball. Yeah. If that means anything. Okay, so I'm a bit new here. You might not all know me, but my name's Kate O'May. I am starting to work with Peter Britz as sort of an associate environmental planner in the planning department upstairs. So hopefully we can get some of these awesome projects through. It sounds great. And so I just was kind of thrown into the climate action plan in the last 2 weeks, and it's looking like we got a great subcommittee that's doing amazing work so far. And so Peter and I are really learning a lot from these guys, and they've given us some awesome information, still are. We're working hard to create an RFP, hopefully that we can at least get drafted and ready to be published by end of July, hopefully mid-July. So, and then after that, we're thinking of hopefully getting a draft going and working through that draft with the subcommittee again, and maybe getting some public input before we publish that. But continuing to work with the subcommittee, I think, is our goal for right now. That's all I have from Peter's end, at least, that he told me to relay to everybody. But I don't know
Is he
if...
on vacation?
No, so Peter actually has another meeting tonight, so we're trying to split tasks a little bit in the next few weeks. Hopefully we can do that more in the future, but
Okay,
yeah.
Peter had mentioned an RFQ in addition to an RFP. Is that gonna happen, or are we just going straight to RFP?
So I'm still learning my acronyms. What's an RFQ?
Qualifications.
Okay. I'm not sure. I'll have to ask him about that, but
I
maybe
thought
the
we
next...
had decided that it wasn't good with where we're at in the timeline, so.
So there was 3 things that were brought up last meeting.
RFP would be coming to kind of
RFP,
see what
RFQ,
interest
and
went through
RFI.
instead of doing.
Those things were brought up.
Okay.
To Steve's point, just in terms of
Yeah, and also to bring everybody up to speed from the last time we discussed this, so, part of this activity has been going out and reading a bunch of climate action plans. And from that, we cherry picked, 6 or 8 or 10 of them exactly. We've actually spoken with several of the cities. So we talked to Concord, Mass, and Boston, and South Portland. Milwaukee, see if I get them right, Milwaukee, Oregon, and Albany, California, did I do it right? We've actually spoken to the folks who developed those caps, and one of the things I think we found was there's so much good work that's already been done in existing climate action plans. We look for cities that have stuff in common with Portsmouth. And to be totally candid, we're gonna do our best to reuse existing good work. So we may, in fact, when I talk to Portland and South Portland, they've been at this for 2.5 years, and they do the whole request for walls, request for information, an enormous amount of community involvement as to what exactly should be in the plan. And their advice to us, given where we are, 2+ years later, was you can add, they actually did what we did, but they said there was a lot less available 2 years ago than there is now. So the advice was take advantage of what's out there. There's just been so much good work done. So I think, and Kate, by the way, welcome. So, what did you happen to Kate? She literally just parachuted into the.
Yeah.
Is it 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, about 2 weeks ago now. So very new.
And you got jumped into the CAP subcommittee, so thank you for still.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's an exciting subcommittee to be in. So I'm excited. There's a lot of other things that I've been thrown into.
It was like a 7-page draft of an RFP, and I was like, this poor girl.
Draft though.
It was a good test, though. And she's still here.
Yeah, yeah. This is the most fun group I've been a part of so far. So I'm having a great time, but excited to be here and excited to get going on this. So
And
it's great.
we do have a couple of other, we have several work streams that come out of the committee too that I think are going to continue parallel to the RFI and the whole community engagement thing we talked about. That's pretty active stream. We're starting a greenhouse gas inventory project. We've actually got some software we can use, and Kate was kind enough to dig up a lot of the historicals. So we're creating stuff that hasn't existed before, but we are making progress. But keep poking at us.
Yeah, definitely. Anything else to add?
So were you going to do the slide presentation again, or just go through it or
Oh, did you
not?
want?
Did you want to say, was that all you wanted to say? Because I saw the slides that you sent to Peter,
Right,
and I didn't know if you wanted to
So-
go over those.
yeah, well, they were draft for this group to look at, so it's now a good time to go through them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, we had talked about, presenting to the city council in July, and, we really only are gonna have 5 to 10 minutes. So this is very distilled from a lot of the work that we've done in this committee and in the, smaller subcommittee for, developing the RFP.
Sorry.
So as you go through this can be kind of a rehearsal for what you'll be doing at City
Well, I
Hall.
wasn't even sure I was the presenter, you know, so.
Well, for all of us, we're thinking we have coming up a presentation.
Right.
So I think everybody on the committee, if you will have a pencil and paper and maybe make notes about what stands out, this is the
Great,
time
okay.
to get our communication the best we can. Two goals I would see. One, for all of us to learn and deepen our knowledge about what a climate action plan possibly could be. And two, what will be useful to do at the council meeting, because that's going to be on TV, and we might get another 50 to 100 people, and we're trying to build awareness of what a climate action plan is, and then ultimately to get buy-in, and ultimately to have ongoing action. So everybody can give
Okay.
feedback.
Great. So, we, as a committee, looked at a number of climate action plans from different cities around the country, particularly cities about the size of Portsmouth. And they are a couple of years ahead of where we are at, so it was very helpful to see what they had put out. And the plans had things in common, like the broad goals and an implementation plan, which would include things like specific strategies to address different issues, responsible parties, timeframes, costs, impacts. And they would have broad goals in the categories of mitigation, which is reducing greenhouse gases, or adaptation, so addressing Portsmouth's resilience to climate change impact. A lot of the plans specifically and explicitly address equity issues, and I think the mayor's made some comments that that's important to him as well as the council. And the plans outlined roles. Very few plans focused only on municipal operations. Most plans looked at residents and households and what we all can do, businesses and organizations.
You know, because I'm presenting a Zoom show for Israel 100 teachers, could we go back to the last slide?
Sure.
If you were to look through here, and one of those points, as you just scan it to yourself, what is the point that just jumps out at you that is most important? And I'd like to just get a quick survey. And also, this is to get us to be involved. How many broad goals and I'm just going to go and say, which of those, if you wanted to talk more about it, would you talk about, Josh? Which one, just one of those bullets?
The implementation plan.
The implementation plan. Who has a different one? John?
The actionable solutions. The second one, prioritizing actionable solutions.
Okay. Who has a different one? Yes.
Climate justice.
Climate justice. Okay. Now, I'm just throwing this out, Effie, as a possible strategy. I don't know how much time we have, but everybody's telling me slides will turn people off. It's just information. We get too much in, and any kind of, and I'm also trying to see if that's a useful way to get us, ourselves to, I don't know, I'm playing. Okay.
Right. And, you know, as I mentioned, these are draft slides, so if this is, you know, not what the group is thinking, we need to hear that as well. So this information is based on a publication by a consulting group called CivForge, Why Local Climate Planning Has Failed. And I prefer to look at it as what makes plans succeed. And that's what we've outlined here. Support from the city, actionable steps, performance measures, and we're hoping we'll have an online dashboard like a lot of cities and towns do, and technical guidance about the greenhouse gas measurements. So, Bert, should we do the same thing on this slide that we did on the last slide, calling things out?
I'm not sure. I'm thinking for Kate, you're on the council.
Yeah.
If you see a lot, and Josh, you see a lot of people coming to do slides. Is it better for them to go straight through? Would you think there might be do you have any guidance for what might be useful to you? That you're the audience, as well as the people.
So far, so good. I think the explanation's helpful. I think it's critical to make sure that the committee requests time to present, not just to have this as sometimes when we get slides like this, they just go in as a report. Instead of just a report, you want to make sure that there's a presentation component, otherwise you might have to explain a little bit more in detail on the slides themselves.
Could you clarify what you just said, because I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I could. So
Yeah.
there's two places this could go on the agenda. It could go up front as an actual presentation, where that would mean this is in the packet for all the counselors and the public to review in advance. Or it could go later on in the packet, just being in the packet. So my strong recommendation would be to present this, but when you do present it, since everyone will have the slides in advance, and not that you're doing this now, don't read the slides. You could just talk about the slides and generalities, but just talk. And yeah, if there's too many slides, people stop paying attention quickly. But if you're not even reading the slides, they'll watch and listen to you.
So that's what I'm trying to see is, the end result is we want to come out with everybody enjoying and getting better information to move it forward. And we already know that we're in an information overload, and unless a slide like this, we could spend a half an hour on with interactive, talk to your partner, other stuff. But I don't think we're gonna do that in the council, because we have 10 minutes. So I think what you're saying, if I'm hearing right, is we take this and we put it in the packet, and then we say, here's a couple of things we want to talk to you about. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Right. I think, yeah, I think it's important that you relate this to what we're doing.
Yeah.
So, because the counselors will all read it, but then they'll say, okay, so how does this relate to what we're doing? So.
Right, so I think when I see this slide, I would redo it and just have, you know, one city's planning process and just what's in bold, and then I would only.
That's exactly
talk
what I
about
was gonna
and
say.
Where are we in Portsmouth? You know, we've already had our carbon footprint done. We have a climate action plan committee in this group. Some of the public engagement we've got going with the Portsmouth Climate Solutions. So this is too much text on the slide.
I don't know, I actually love the data, or the
You
information
like it this
explaining
way?
it. Yeah, because I think a lot of members of the council won't know these explanations, what these things are necessarily.
Oh, okay.
So that's, but, I mean, as long as you don't talk, go through them.
I'm not gonna read them.
Yeah, then you're, and if you highlight the things that we like in particular,
Okay.
or that the
You
subcommittee
also
likes.
put it in the appendix, just like if they want like another takeaway, right? Like if even if you're not gonna read it, they might be reading it, which might be distracting from what you're saying. So like, I do a lot of presentations at work, and a lot of times we have like stuff, we're like, that's kind of a helpful slide, but maybe not for the actual presentation. We just put in the appendix so you can read it. That's right.
So John, what would you suggest then? I'm not clear on that.
So I don't know how many slides there are, but whatever your wrap-up slide is, it says thank you or something, put another break and then say appendix, and then just bring it all the way down.
Oh, okay. So this kind of with a lot of specific
I
information.
think that's
going
an
in
eye chart that you're looking
Yeah,
at.
so it wouldn't be when you present it to the council, but it'd still be in the packet.
Anyone that would read the packet, it would have.
Josh, when do you get your packets?
So the packets, the information needs to be to the city clerk by noon the Wednesday prior, so
And your meeting is on Monday.
And
our
we get it
meeting's the following
Friday.
Monday, we get it on Friday.
Do you typically read through your packet ahead of meeting?
I do, I read through it on the weekend.
Do all of the councilors do that?
This council, yes, they do.
When you have to request to speak, to present, is that?
So that request would have to be into the city manager by noon that Wednesday prior. So I think that's July 3rd. No, wait,
Monday's the
It's
Six.
it's the fifth week.
fifth or, either way.
Yeah, it's the Wednesday before. I think it's the fifth or sixth. It's the sixth, isn't it?
3, 4, 5.
I'm double checking. Yeah, the sixth. The sixth that they.
I'd be remiss if I didn't finish what my thought was, and that is, I don't want to show up to do a presentation to the city council about something they received in their packet, which they haven't read or digested as much as they can prior to the presentation, because that's when they're going to start reading the slides or listening to you. They're not going to do both.
I think that you'd find that the city council has already read their
Okay.
packet, their information in advance.
We'll grade them.
If you're showing slides to the council, you're also showing slides to the public. Public probably will not have read all that.
No,
ahead of
no,
time.
they won't.
And then, again, kind of to John's point, and your point too, you know, if the people in the crowd are trying to read this and they're not paying attention to you at the same time. Was the intent to go over each one of these points in any kind of detail?
No, just to show that it's a long process, and then on the next slide, it talks about where Portsmouth is at and the next steps. So maybe,
Yeah, I like John's idea then.
yeah.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
if you were, then you could have a slide that was just all those bullet points.
Yeah.
And then as you're going into each one, just have that one and a slide that has the text for that one. And then just, even if you're spending 20 seconds a slide, just fast forward through
Have more
12 slides instead of just one slide that has
Less
everything
information.
on it.
Yeah.
But-
Quick question, when you read through your packets, are you usually making notes, and is there generally questions, so we should have a slide at the end? Are there any questions, or is that pretty much in a short presentation not being done these days.
We could ask questions.
Yeah. If we're allowed to ask questions,
But
I don't
do-
know that there will be a lot of questions.
Okay.
Because the council knows that the committee is
Actively
doing this
going.
work. Yes,
Got it.
exactly. It's more like a check-in.
Yeah, just enough, it's an update. Here's an update where we're at. A lot of good work has been done. We want to keep you on board, we want to keep the public on board. And we'll keep it simple if you have any questions at the end or suggestions, something like that. Great.
Is there anything else on that?
I guess maybe if people don't have context, like I wonder if there's a slide that ties together the proposal of the cap with other long-term plans in Portsmouth, right? Like, so you make clear that you're not asking something new or unnatural, right? Like there already are, I don't know, 4 or 5 long-term plans that, like, there's cycling, there's open spaces. I don't know, like, is that helpful for people that might have objections, be like, oh, you guys are trying to spend billions of dollars and do this weird thing? And be like, look, these things already exist, this is just another one of many to kind of improve the overall community.
We're kind of tying it into the master plan.
Yeah, and I would reword that to say summarize various city plans for CAP to align with.
Yeah.
I think it's even separate than that. I think it's saying that we've already, as a community, I believe, passed, keeping on this, right? Like,
Became a
Keep the
sustainability.
municipality.
what else is there? There's, open
Pass.
spaces plan, there's, Prescott Park master plan, like, they're just saying, like, this is one of many.
Net zero energy.
Almost like you're like envisioning sort of a tree of like, okay, this is all the stuff that we had done in the
And
past.
I don't even
This
think it
is
needs
all
to-
the stuff that can get brought into or under the umbrella of the climate action plan. Is that kind of what you're?
Yeah, I was actually saying, I don't know, maybe I was thinking too far into it, but I was thinking if someone objects to be like, and whether it's the council or the public being like, this is a weird thing that you guys are trying to do, just be like, well, we have a bike and pedestrian plan, we have, site plan, Prescott Park master plan, just trying to say, like, there are existing other things that these map to.
I don't think that you're gonna get objections from the council,
I was thinking public too.
but the public won't have, I mean, there'll be public comment
So-
after the presentation,
Yeah.
but I doubt there'll be much public comment on this, to be honest.
What I would have said at bullet 3 is, plans that we've looked at, our renewable energy plan, the open space plan, the master plan, those kind of things have to be considered
Yeah.
writing our climate action plan.
Right, and we can also share, one of the things we want to put forth is we're not doing it as a blank sheet of paper. Several of the cities that we have talked to, we reviewed their caps, we asked them, we put together a pro forma of questions. And one of the questions was, how did you engage the rest of the municipality? So we're not starting from scratch, and we wouldn't want anyone to think we are. So that, I mean, that's obviously a work in progress, but that's part of a cap, is the cap ties to other things going on in the city. So we may just want to highlight that, because it's a good point, John. People, anyone will worry about whether we're not considering.
Just gets ahead of it,
Yeah, absolutely.
And there are other committees that are working on plans right now. I think that's, I sit on arts and nonprofits as well, and they're working on a cultural plan. And it's our second one. It's been 20 years since the first one. Now we're doing another cultural plan. It's essentially updating and rewriting. So we have a history of doing kind of these bigger planning projects.
Along that line, I think I want to refer to what Chris said earlier, and whether we want to do this, whether it's a tricky area. But Chris said, if I heard him correctly, and what I think many of us have thought and said over and over again, the IPCC, International Panel on Climate Change, the most extensive organization that is recognized by governments and science, has come out in this last year and said that this is now. There's a closing window of time. So why are we talking about a climate action plan? We've had all kinds of other plans. So yes, in some degree, a climate action plan is different than the pieces that all need to come together. And so it's big, it's comprehensive, it's necessary, and its goal is to accelerate and scale the change that is necessary to come about in the next 5 to 10 years.
And it's also a Venn diagram, right, Bert? I mean, there's significant areas of intersection between the elements of CAP and the elements of these other plans.
Or this would be the circle that has the Venn inside it. So, yeah, I think there's many ways to represent it. And Chris, I saw your hand go up, but I was.
Obviously, I'm new to this. This is a question I ask myself all the time, like, what is the objective, the learning objective of this presentation? Is it to educate the public of what Portsmouth is doing?
It's more directed to the city council to update them. You know, they heard about the climate action.
Okay, so this is to update the council on
Yeah,
what
but-
Portsmouth is doing for their climate action.
But a
plan.
much wider audience will hear it, but, so.
I think we have to define, you know, when I plan a lesson, I start with what is the objective? What is the learning objective? And I think your decision about how you present this has to go to what are you trying to accomplish by showing this information to the city council? Like, Are you trying to compare it to what other cities are doing that you've researched, or are you trying to show the city council what's already in place? Are you trying to educate them on what our climate action plan is? Like,
I think we're
that
trying to
needs to go.
justify the amount of money that we need to get a start.
We're updating them that we're making progress on doing a climate action plan.
so the objective would be to show them what Portsmouth actions have been. Then I think that needs to guide what is in this presentation.
If you were, the three of you, if you were sitting listening to this presentation, would you understand what was happening, going on, being discussed? I mean, I'm sure you have some awareness of climate action plans, but just sitting here, listening to this, would it make sense to you?
I think for context, so the council's already aware that they spent $100,000 to fund this climate
I
action
know the
plan.
council will
The
know,
council
but I'm
knows.
saying, like, if we keep talking secondarily as the public's gonna hear this, and this might be the first time the public hears about the climate action plan, are they gonna have any clue what this
Because I didn't
means?
give any context.
Because, and I appreciate, to Chris's point, it's two different audiences, it's essentially two different presentations, but if you're trying to balance both audiences.
I think you can do it pretty quickly with a starting statement. Like, I think that is like, you know, in a lot of college professors I had, you started the class and you're like, this is what you're gonna learn today, and then you have many, many slides of, I mean, we will not have many, many slides, but you get all the information, and at the end of that course, it's, so, like, this is what we went over today, you know? Next week, we're gonna talk about this. So I think with this, we could do the same thing. You know, this committee was made to help in the process of developing the CAP. You know, the CAP ties into all of these different plans in Portsmouth with the goal of us having a overall plan that ties in and addresses climate change. Here's where we are, then we go into the slides. Okay, so I think maybe that first slide is just a little bit more of like, then it updates the public, but it also, it's only a couple of minutes of the counselor's time where they're just like, oh, okay, yeah, like I know this, but it's a sentence, we can move on, but then maybe the public's a little bit more like, okay.
Yeah, I would caution against trying to gear it towards a public audience, because even though the council meetings are public, especially in the summer, they're not well attended. So I wouldn't anticipate that you're going to have a lot of the public watching. So.
That's helpful, very
Mm-hmm.
helpful.
All right, are we ready to move on, or do we have more?
One last comment. One of the slides had a bunch of acronyms, and the only acronym which the council might know on that was the RFP, and that was the one which was spelled out. The other ones like greenhouse gases, it wasn't spelled out, it just said GHG. The same thing with the, whatever the program is to monitor greenhouse gases. So spelling those out might.
All right, so next we have,
I think there's one more slide.
oh, one more slide, sorry. No, you're fine.
I think it's this last one.
Because I think this is probably the most important thing I have to say, that just because we're gonna be working with a consulting team on the climate action plan doesn't mean we have to wait till 2024 when the plan will be ready. We have a lot of things going on in the meantime. And I don't know if this is what makes sense for us to list, so I'd love feedback about this.
Would it make, oh, sorry. I was just gonna ask, would it make sense to include, and this is especially for the general public too, some of the projects that are in flight? So that I think as you were saying, right, we're not waiting for the plan to completely be in place, that there's a lot of good work that's being done right now. Just a thought.
I think keeping it general is important because part of developing the CAP is having, the whole point of having that consultant come in is to use their expertise, but also balance that with what Portsmouth already knows and all of our other plans. And it can be hard to get bogged down in specific solutions when the plan is an overall thing, where all of these solutions come in to be a one cohesive effort. So I think I like making a point of those individual solutions, but maybe it's kind of like that tree or like an umbrella of the CAP is the umbrella to all of these small things. But
When you say the small things, do you mean the things listed here?
yeah, and also, the different working groups and the different open space plans and that's kind of all these things that we're saying, we're making an overall plan, or we're asking a consultant to help us make an overall plan.
We're building the
But this-
airplane while we're flying it, and I see, right, I mean, the cap is ultimately going to guide
You're
all.
traffic control if you want.
Yeah, right, so that's ultimately gonna guide it, but, it doesn't mean we're not flying the airplane,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah,
And I think you're talking about some of the specific projects that are taking place.
Exactly.
Like the infrastructure for the EV chargers.
Yeah.
That's gonna be done, that project will be done before the cap is done.
Yeah.
But there's still a home for it in the cap. So
And-
that's a good point.
yeah, and I think, yeah, and the great point is that we can't wait till the cap, right? I mean, I think that's what everybody's saying, is we can't wait till the cap is done,
Yeah.
and we're not.
Yep.
And here's some of the
And-
great things that we're doing
I think that's a great.
in
I
parallel.
like the way that's phrased.
And that, I think that resonates strongly with the general public too,
Mhm.
as they see that.
I was just gonna say that to this presentation, correct me if I'm wrong, but this isn't about just the cap, it's about what's the sustainability committee doing,
Yeah.
reporting
I was just gonna
to
say, I think that was
the
part of
council,
the
so.
original
So the cap is part of that, but
justification
other things that we're doing is the rest of that.
Yeah.
Can I ask the date we're anticipating the cap being finished? again? What was the date?
2024 in the
April.
spring is an estimate.
That's really
Based-
late.
But again, keep in mind, we haven't even begun the process of selecting.
Because-
consultant yet, so
I know.
And I-
we're that early.
I'm just concerned
That's 2
about
years,
if you
yeah.
push it into 2024. You have an election between now and then, and you might not have a council that's excited about adopting the climate action plan in April
So
2024.
not
We don't
using
know.
that date.
Yeah, I would,
But
well, no, I mean, I'm saying you should.
So it'll be
push it
done by
to
November 23.
I would finish it in the 400.
Finish it what?
I don't know, I
In
would.
the 400?
I would have it adopted in the 400th anniversary year of the city. I wouldn't push it out to 2024. I
It's
know
not
you have
that
a
I'm-
council.
It's
that's
not that I'm
excited.
pushing it out, it's just that most of the plans we've looked at and cities we've talked to have taken 18 months to do the plan. And the RFP, we're looking at it going out in July, then the bids come back, they have to be reviewed, and,
Well,
so it
This-
starts.
this
in-
comes out in early '24. The election won't be held until November.
Not for city council.
No, city, you'll
It's
have a
in
new
the
city
obvious.
council in 2024.
Hmm?
You'll have a new city council in 2024. You don't know who's gonna be sitting on your council.
Oh, so we don't,
That's what I'm trying to say, is that you don't know. So, I would
So,
love to
I mean,
say that.
We could add that to the RFP, to have it done in 12 months.
And maybe for this discussion, we might consider stepping away from Kate's question. We don't know yet what the delivery date is. This is where we are with this
Right.
progress.
Right, so there was a slide, a couple of slides back, I think, whoops, that was it.
Yeah.
No,
Oh,
that's
one.
right, sorry. That, it said, estimate April 2024, we'll just take that out.
Yeah, I think so.
I would say that this council, that's one of this council's goals,
Mm.
and this council won't be happy with the fact that,
Mhm.
that
That's
it's
fair.
not
No,
finished
that's a-
until
that's a
after this
totally fair
council's
point.
term ends.
But it would have to be late 2023.
It's still within the council's term.
Okay.
Although I wouldn't go after November, if I were you. I wouldn't go after November 3rd or 4th. I'd try to finish it by
So-
October.
If you think you're in great shape, just take off that bottom line, because all the
Yeah.
rest of it lays it out, and
Yeah.
that would be just.
I want to just get
But
into the notes.
Sorry.
I just want to get into the notes that this whole council meeting, this might be the most important statement. You never know what comes out. So when I just heard that, that is a significant statement that can really give focus and energy to how we accept the bid, who we put it out to. So to me, that was very helpful to hear. And that's what I love about a group mind, when each of us is able to put our piece in. So thank you.
So the RFP will have to reflect that,
Yeah, we'll have to think about that.
like a 12-month.
Mhm.
So I don't have pride of ownership with this. I am not personally planning on presenting this, so, you know, if we want to talk about whether it's the subcommittee or this bigger committee, because as Aubrey said, we did talk about this being an update on the sustainability committee. So I'm looking for takers.
I do think it would make sense for someone from the CAP subcommittee to present, because most of the city council's questions, if they have any, will be focused on the CAP itself.
Okay.
And you guys are most familiar with the process.
We're closest to it.
Yeah, sure are, so.
And I can say, on the committee, you guys are all very powerful in your knowledge, and you might want to play tag team, so that the two of you are, anyway. And I would be happy to go with anybody else, maybe an Eco Club member, to just give it a little wider context. Here's what we're working on, and anyway, to give context with the committee, and maybe somebody from the Eco Club could say, here, we could get a little texture of what the committee is, and how really this is the biggest committee we've ever had in 5 years, because this is the time. So anyway, and so if the committee, when is it, July?
11.
Let me look at it.
So the subcommittee could meet before then.
Yeah.
Go through this. We could also come up with what's missing from the bigger sustainability committee.
Yeah, and if you could do that,
Distribute that back.
Yeah.
there's somebody.
And then talk to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that'd be great.
Okay, great. And I think what I would do is take some text off the slides too.
I can help you with that, if you do that, like all day long, just clean up slides.
All right, all set with that?
Great,
Alright.
thank you.
I can't see what's next. All right. Next we have the climate action survey. Was that kind of related to what we just did? Is that something simple, different?
Yes, so the climate action survey was a conversation, I think we had in the subcommittee about trying to start to get community engagement around the climate action plan and start to learn about what the public's priority was. And so just as part of the city's newsletter, maybe attaching a simple survey that just kind of said, you know, had 5 or 6 questions asking people about what are your priorities, whether that means you're worried about greenhouse gas emissions, whether you're worried about bike lanes, whether you're worried about waste, just to start to get some bigger picture ideas from the community, so that as we move forward with the climate action plan, it's also a way for us to tell them, okay, this is what you told us your concerns are, so this is why this is in the climate action But in that conversation about the survey, we thought it might be helpful to bring it here before this committee to help create those questions, what that might look like, what people's thoughts were around.
Are there any examples from the other cities that you reached out to? I was just curious if they did some sort of survey
Oh, yeah.
of their population, and so maybe we could.
They range from skinny to a year and a half or so. Yeah, so it's pretty
Okay.
broad.
Okay, so
And
we
I
might
think
be able,
there's some good lessons learned there for us, all of the
we might be able to capitalize on some of the questions.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
It's a good starting point.
In somewhere, material.
Do you know, I'm thinking social media for the presentation of this survey, because everybody's on it, some one or another. To use that as your medium for collecting, whether it's monkey, chimp, or whatever.
Survey
that you-
monkey. Survey monkey.
Yeah, that one.
Or MailChimp. You put the two of them together.
There you go.
Since we have an expert on this here, do you know what the cost is to put a flyer in the water bill, sewer water bills? Like a survey with a, a scan?
Not the exact dollar, but it doesn't cost that much because, we send the bills out, it's just the printing and they put it with the, but I can get that number. It's minimal relative to other things.
Because that was just done for the
Right.
community power, so.
Now, I know that there was a cost associated with it, so we have to have.
Yeah. I can get
whatever
that.
the printing cost is and the paper cost,
Yep.
but it might be, you reach every household that way.
You do. The one thing that, and we're starting to parse this out a bit, is it goes to customers in Newington and Greenland, and we've done other things where we sort of let them know to some degree. I mean, there's many, they're part of the school district too, and, so it really, we don't get pushback when we talked about stormwater and gave everybody information on that, and it was broad enough that it applied to everybody that has a house and has a property, so.
One thing I think we should think about with a survey is that, well, like with any survey, like polling, for example, they're often very leading. You're trying to get people to choose a certain thing by the way you word things. Politicians do that all the time. And I don't think we should do that, but I do think that since I think there's a really wide range in the general populace of how much information they know about climate change and about real solutions versus greenwashing type solutions, that I think that however we craft it, it ought to be really well formed out of the drawdown principles as our guidance on there. So that we're not only using it to get opinions from people, but also to educate people of what the real types of solutions are.
Ones that are most doable.
Right, and most impactful.
Sense to have a separate subcommittee on just the survey? And we're not there yet, but.
It might.
I mean, in a way, that subcommittee would act, if we're talking about time frame for this cap, one of the biggest parts is in this, to these consultants, we're asking them to make sure that they're engaging, right, all of our city plans, but also the public, and that they're not just regurgitating a cap from another city, that it's tailored to us. And so by doing things like the survey and by engaging the public early on, the hope is that it can expedite that process without losing
And
that
generate
important part.
enthusiasm.
So, in a way, that subcommittee could be kind of the cap expedite subcommittee of doing some of that public engagement, being made up of some of the public and.
That whole public engagement thread, the more we talk about it, the bigger it gets.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but yeah.
And I think that's truly the time part of that for the consultants.
That's
right. Is that takes a lot of time.
There's a lot of opportunity next year, especially in public gatherings, because there's so many around the 400. There's just so many opportunities to have that additional public engagement and to set up, you know, a tent here, or a table here, you know, every single possible event we can. And just gather as much information as possible. It might expedite the process. And I would imagine those events start as early as April of 2023. But we also have the rest of the summer and the fall, so don't forget that you can start this year.
At least that's my goal, because my feeling is that this community information needs to help shape the CAP too. So we want that now, especially if we're trying to move the CAP along. So I would hope to start spreading public awareness now and getting feedback from the public now.
Anything else on that? I'll set to move on. All right.
Well, Josh suggested a subcommittee about the survey, or maybe community engagement more broadly. So I don't know if we want to set that up at this point, or just have it in minutes for a future meeting.
How about everyone give thought if they would want to be on a subcommittee for the next meeting?
Good.
And then if by the next meeting, if you could assemble the past surveys, which you've seen,
Mhm.
that way people could look at what the goal would be. And it'd be great to have something in place, but for whoever is selected, they might bring something to the table as well regarding how best to do community engagement. So I'm not sure if we want to get started prior, maybe we can get our ducks in a row, but maybe not send the survey out until we have someone picked. But
Yeah, I like the thought about the community engagement. It'd be real curious to see what some of the other cities had gone through, because, you know, community engagement is key.
Yeah.
You know, if not that, then why are we here? Right, I mean, we're here to serve the
And not
community.
just up front, right? We need to keep the community involved
Yeah.
and get it, keep it expanding.
And the survey's critical, but it's not a one and done.
Right, absolutely.
It's just a part of, yeah, that resonates strongly, yeah.
That's, no, but we could probably pull together some of the highlights of the community engagement part of the gaps and distribute that. Or we could point you to the entire library and you can read it all. It's this ginormous Google check. That's a good one.
All right. Anything else on that one? All set. Next thing is Portsmouth Climate Solutions.
Well, we have three people who are there. Either of you want to say anything about Portsmouth Climate Solutions?
Well, I'll start by talking about Plastic Free July. There's going to be an exhibit at the library, and we talked about ways to engage people about those issues. I don't know, Jess, if you want to add anything. Jess is expert.
I don't know about that. I think it kind of just dovetails a little bit into what we just talked about. My impression of where Portsmouth Climate Solutions is moving forward is really to help support this committee in the community engagement and outreach piece. And so I know I'm working with Christina Dubin of Surfrider, and we're going to put together a display for Plastic Free July in the library. I'm hoping to do a film in the fall about plastic, and so we are hoping to keep brainstorming ideas like that, and also dovetailing community awareness involvement in the CAP, and just educating them on how we're moving forward and getting feedback from them, and so just tying those two pieces together better. Add anything?
Well, at the end of the meeting, we talked about different, we're looking at 2 platforms that are for customizable, interactive platforms for households and organizations and businesses to use. And we looked at examples online like coolerconcord.org or Carbon Free Albany. And the vendors for these sites are Mass Energize for the Massachusetts sites and Bright Action for sites in 10 states. And what it would would look like is you would go onto the site because the climate action plan or the city newsletter sent you to them, and you'd say, well, what could I do to slow down climate change? And it gives you options within, let's say, your home or your business place, your transportation, and you click on these actions and it gives you more information like, well, this is rated as something fairly easy, changing light bulbs in my home. Let me find out about that. You click on it, find out all the resources and how to do it, and then if you commit to it, you click on it, done, you know. And you get points for that, and it shows you how many trees or how many tons of carbon, whatever the platform is set up to do. And it's a way of getting neighborhoods and groups within a community going, whether it's Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or a church or a business. It just seemed like a really good tool that would be good for Portsmouth to adopt. So we're talking about which one, and next meeting, which will be July. Oh yeah, not next weekend because we're going to the Community Power Solutions meeting at 3S, so the one, July 3rd, I think is the date.
We
We're
should
gonna be
put that in
talking
the
about
notes.
these two different platforms and what fits best for Portsmouth and how they work. And eventually, we'll probably have demonstrations for each of these platforms. You know, we're not changing it right away. But this is one of those things that the group felt like we could commit to and get going before we have a climate action plan. Something visible, something lively, something out in the community that everybody could be doing. And then once that plan comes out, it just, yes, helps guide what the information is.
Back to our point, we're building the plan as we play. It is what it is, but it works. It's nothing to be afraid of.
We can't wait.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would just reinforce what you said, that Portsmouth Climate Solutions meets on Zoom every Wednesday for 1 hour from 7 to 8. We've met since we started the course on Drawdown Solutions. We've been through 37 continuous weeks. We're going to take the next meeting and we're going to go to 3S because it's at the same time. Does anybody want to say about the 3S program for those who don't know about it?
I could speak to it real briefly if no one else wants to. So next Wednesday at 3S Art Space, there's going to be a joint presentation on community power, which is essentially what it would be. It would give ratepayers the option to get their electricity from a renewable energy source. It's a real simplistic way to go about it. There will be a lot of steps to get there, everything from ratepayers having to opt out of it from their electric bill, and the state house still has to act on it. But there's going to be a presentation on all of that next Wednesday, and what I'm most excited about, for anyone who listens to NHPR, specifically the Outside In podcast, Sam Evans-Brown, who hosted it for years up until recently, is going to be one of the presenters there. So that's going to be pretty cool.
Sam is the current chair of Clean Energy New Hampshire, so he's a great advocate, he's a partner for a lot of organizations. It'll be a good take.
And you have to sign up, so you have to go on 3S's website if you want to attend and get a ticket.
I think
Because
it's
there is-
portsmouthsmartgrowth.org
It
where you
is.
register.
Yeah, you can go through 3S, I think
Oh,
there's a
yeah.
link
Right.
from 3S, or there was, hopefully there still is. And so, but you do have to register and have a ticket, because there is a capacity limit.
And then in 2 weeks, we're going to come back and we're going to be looking at these dashboards. And I was thinking, Chris, when I taught sustainable living, we used to have students take an ecological footprint. Has your class, or have you ever considered, I hadn't even known about these dashboards, how detailed they are. As a class, you could see about a goal of lowering your class footprint. Anyway, I don't know if you ever played with those or if you ever
We
entertained
did a
them.
very rudimentary carbon footprint station that was just to give them a sense of where carbon enters the atmosphere. So that was a very low scale, easy to use one.
Yeah, and I've been out of that for 10 years, and I looked at this and I said, I was riding a horse and buggy, and this is a jet engine. So if you look at these sites, it's amazing the tools we have. So how do we get them in? So, yeah.
I was gonna say, that it's off the 3S space, you do have to go to PortsmouthSmartGrowth.org. PortsmouthSmartGrowth.org to get tickets.
Great. Next up, oops, sorry. The city council report.
So we actually hit all 3 of those, and I think that brings us to Portsmouth H2O. Is that you, Brian?
H2O.
Yeah.
Combo, I'm sitting right next to John, so he wanted to talk about our water sustainability, water efficiency efforts, which we're pretty proud of. We do have a PowerPoint on our website that's been updated that has that, but I'm not gonna do the death by PowerPoint, but it summarizes stuff. John's ideas kind of expand beyond what the city's already done, which I kind of like, because there's always more you can do. We have reduced water use amongst our customers for many reasons. Number one, you can't discount the fact that water bills are fairly expensive. Our sewer rates are tied to water usage. So if people want to reduce their overall water bill, which is tied to sewer as well, they use less water. So, I mean, that dollar incentive is a biggie. But we also have tiered rates, which means that if you use more water, you're going to pay more. So that is becoming more and more common in the industry. A few years ago, we updated our irrigation to put a 3rd tier in. So if people want to irrigate, they're paying more. If they're using more, again, that promotes them looking at what type of system they put in to make it as efficient as possible. The biggest thing we've done is our rebate program. So people, if they have an old toilet, and they replace it with a water efficiency toilet, one that's efficient, they can get $100 back. And if you get a high efficiency washing machine, everybody knows about the toilets, the low flow toilets, and of course I've been around long enough to know that when they first came out, they didn't work very well. People were flushing a lot. They work pretty good now. They are designed to where they flush like any normal high flow toilet will. Surprising enough, in Portsmouth, probably, the old housing stock, there's some toilets that might flush 5 gallons to, the big, toilets of old. They were reduced to about 3.5, and right now you can't purchase a toilet that does over 101.6 gallons. So that's good. Just doing that itself is a big reduction, and I did a calculation of all the rebates that we've done. We've done combined about 1,500 rebates in the last 7 years, and then I calculated, just using, and I know it was mentioned like, oh, you can do this, click this, how much is you going to save, and all that. So we do have some meter data that we've looked at before and after, and then you go into some of the overall, how do you average things out? How do you just, give an overall look at how much water can be saved? The toilets that everybody is aware of, what people aren't as much aware of is how much an old top-loading washing machine can use. It's ridiculous. Some of them use 50 gallons for an entire, because, think about the old style top-loading washing machine. If you just throw a couple pieces of clothes in there, it's going to fill water to the top. And so if you want to do a full load, so the clothes take up some of that space, but you're still filling it up. And then it's washing, and then it's draining, and then it's rinsing. So it's doing that again. So an old top loader washer will use 40 to 50 gallons a load, where the front load, or they have high efficiency top loaders now, they'll use 15 to 20 gallons, and, you know, depending on the cycles and stuff. So I calculated, you know, those 1,500 rebates that we've given probably account to about 50,000 gallons of water saved a day, which is about a 1.4% reduction. So we meter everything, we know how much water we're making, so, you know, it's not huge, but it's certainly worth it, because, you know, I get criticized, you know, not criticized, but for years I've said this to my peers in the water industry, and it's like, gee, Brian, why do you want to tell people to save water? We're going to lose our revenue. And I'm like, no, you're not. If it doesn't happen overnight. So here we've done it for 7 years. That reduction is 1.4%. You can certainly absorb whatever change that is over time, as far as, you know, what you expect to get for revenue. And the other thing is 50,000 gallons of water that you didn't have to go and find a new well, or withdraw from a river, or desalinate, as some people say, well, let's just go to the ocean to get our next gallon of water. And, you know, the other thing I pitch is, well, if you put a new well in, you know, it costs money to get the land, to put the well in, get it permitted, you're testing it, you're maintaining it. It's a piece of working equipment that needs maintenance, uses electricity, and saving a gallon of water only costs up front. So once you've put in that low flow toilet, it's always using less water, and so it's done. So you can move on to other things. So that, and I know what John had said, he's got a great summary of some ideas which are really good, is like, how can the city expand beyond that? I know you asked, one of the first things we did was a retrofit kit program, which we don't do anymore because we've moved on to the rebates. That, you know, just advertising and letting people know, I think the same thing we can do in a bill stuffer, and, you know, let people know that don't already, that we do have the rebates, and expanding them. You had asked, you know, how do we what's a qualified appliance? So we go with WaterSense, which is an EPA program. Initially, they were really stepping it up. The 4 years, well now, during I'll just say the previous administration, they were getting rid of all these programs, and fortunately, this one didn't go away, and stayed there, and now we can, you know, utilize what they're doing as far as efficiency efforts. So if you have WaterSense and you have Energy Star, so appliances that are Energy Star are also generally water efficient. So there's lists that we go by. So when people come in and they have the receipt for a toilet, or they have the receipt for the washing machine they upgraded, you know, our staff looks and makes sure it's on the list. Yes, it's qualified, and they get it. So I mean, you had mentioned you know, dishwashers, so we could look to expand that, and you know, there could be a few other things. Shower heads. So shower heads are interesting. That was another thing the previous administration said. You know, it was complaining about the amount of water you get when you take a shower, so wanted to, you know, get rid of that. And they somewhat said, okay, well, no, shower heads won't do more than 2.5 gallons a minute when you turn them on. And taking a shower does use less water than if you take a bath, because bathtubs might be 50, 75 gallons. So 2.5 gallons a minute, 10-minute shower, it's 25 gallons, much less than a bath. You know, we could perhaps expand out there. I don't know you know, how much more, you know, the giving people the kits would do, but that's also a possibility too. But maybe I'll turn it over to you to kind of expound on some of your ideas too.
No, that's great, and, you know, I'll start with, you know, everything I've read is that Portsmouth is doing a fantastic job with water sustainability and saving, so like, it's not a criticism against
No.
anyone. But I think I'd say here, like, every system can be optimized and probably like improved a little bit, so I laid out what I thought were some interesting ideas, I guess, for plans. Some taking advantage of current processes, like, you know, the rebate program, right? Like, how do we amplify that message more, so more people do that, so that 1,500 number goes to 2,000 this year, right? So more people take advantage of the existing thing, that is pretty lightweight and easy. We can use like a city newsletter, social media, Larry's favorite, or, you know,
Yeah.
the water bills themselves. And then, yeah, how do we kind of expand on that more, right? Like dishwashers or shower heads, especially if we are gonna do that outreach to the city broadly, right? Like, it would be good to deliver this additional news, right? Be like, hey, you know, here are all the appliances, including some new ones, so people that have already done it are also aware of that as well. So that was kind of the first point. I think there's two other just ones that I'd love to kind of get your opinion on is, so, in this book that I read, which is all about like how you can have choice architecture to have people decide what to do, they highlighted an interesting use case where basically the city indexed people's water bills against other people in that same neighborhood. So again, it's all relative kind of to where you live. And in doing so, they would say, hey, listen, you know, your water bill is, you know, 20% more than your neighbors, right? Like, just by that little kind of additional metric, it decreased people just naturally, for whatever reason, they want to be their neighbors or save money, right? Just by having that on the additional metric on the water bill, resulted in 8% water consumption reduction in 12 months. And that's, it was up on liters, that's, you know, 12,500 liters.
Yeah, I've noticed that on the electric, so we used to live in Durham, live in Portsmouth now, but our electric bill, once a year, they would send out the electric bill, and they would say, oh, you're better or worse than your neighbors, and you know.
It sounds like a perfect use case for the app, that, like, that's the same.
Yeah.
Community groups, and you see it.
So
Cool.
we do have a new billing system, and I don't know how many people in here get a water bill? Okay, so, do you notice it does now have, your water bill has a monthly chart, so I'd pushed for that for years, and our old billing system wouldn't allow that, where you couldn't get that kind of graphic on there. So we do have that now. It took, you know, a year when it started, when you first got that new bill, it only had the first month. So now everybody has 12 months, so you can look at that. But interesting idea to try to maybe overlay that with similar customers, so, you know, you could say, you know, even a line across, it would say, you know, here's what the average is, and it's like, oh, I'm below the line or above the line.
Do you still, are you still able, as a Portsmouth resident, to have 2 meters? One for household use and one for outside use?
Yes,
You know, at which you don't get charged a sewer rate
right.
for the outside
And,
use?
and the incentive there was that, oh, I'll really cut my sewer bill, but to offset that, that's when we went to the 3rd tier rate. So people do the comparative, they have come to us like, oh, I'm ready to put my irrigation meter in. We give them all the information, and a lot of them decide, okay, I'm not gonna go that route. Because it does increase considerably.
Oh, yeah.
On the irrigation side. But again, you know, you get people, I mean, I've been around long enough and I've worked in Park City, Utah, where people didn't care how much the water cost. They wanted a green lawn and they wanted to pay for it. And they just said, turn the pumps up or get more water, and, you know.
Well, that's not the only reason to have it. I mean, if you've got a
Yeah.
garden,
Yeah.
you wanna get your most production you can, so you don't want the stuff drying out and drying up. What about gray water? Does the city do anything to capture that?
So gray water's interesting because now, I know Counselor Denton brought this up. You have building codes. Gray water is a tough one on the building code. I mean, I know some people talk about reuse of their water, but we don't have a secondary system. So some newer developments like in Florida or whatever, you know, they put a subdivision goes in and you can actually pipe up from day one irrigation that uses gray water, which they call it gray water because it's not potable drinking water, but a lot of it is still very clean because
Anything that comes from your dishwasher or
so
your sink.
we are looking at, so we have 2 wastewater facilities, and the Pierce Island is done with its upgrade, and the Pease has to have an upgrade, and with that upgrade, we are looking at using water discharge from that and go through further treatment and being able to bring it back and have facilities use it for cooling water or irrigation. So we're looking at that. It's just a huge amount of money. That's the only downside of it.
This was my question, because there's
Yeah.
an island off California's coast, and that's what they do. They
Yep.
use it because they don't get enough water. So frankly, if you're gonna water anything besides, you know, as far as drinking water, they use it even for things like showers, which I think is a little extreme. But it's so close to like Prescott Park. You know, when you think about the greenery at Prescott Park, it wouldn't be that hard to test case it, really do a test case of the
They
irrigation at Prescott Park.
use cisterns in the Bahamas that catch the water and then it goes into a cistern, and that's what you then put through your water heater for showers and stuff.
So, I like this idea.
Okay.
It's an exciting idea.
I do too, but.
It's expensive.
All in time, yeah.
It's a long pipe.
And
But
I didn't wanna
water
steal
is
your
going to
thunder.
be one of the most expensive utilities in days and years to come.
So just to kind of round off on this and to piggyback off that, you know, Brian, you mentioned that, every once in a while, you have a contractor who does kind of like water analysis for the city, and I don't know if that's where that kind of Pease idea came from, or like, have there been any other kind of like big, exciting or interesting things? Like I threw out like capturing rainwater for, you know, for fire, to water the trees, or for like the street sweepers. Is there any like?
I didn't even know. You were someone I could look up to when I first started.
That rainwater across the city.
So, John, this is not to do with repurposing the rainwater, but there's early discussions of creating a third enterprise fund. So one enterprise fund we have is drinking water, the other one is sewer, the third one would be runoff. And I don't think it happened this year. I would love to see it this term, us actually create one. And essentially what it would do, it would bill people for the amount of water runoff that they have. So you have places like, not to pick on Walmart, they have a huge parking lot. A lot of it's wasted, and a lot of it's not permeable, so all the water runs off. And you can incentivize it where, hey, you will have your bill will be less if you have more permeable surfaces, so on and so forth. So that would incentivize things like catching water and making use of it.
And Josh, those are things we can influence at the city level, building codes, is that what you're?
Yeah, well, it would be an actual third, I'd say, bill that residents would receive, water runoff. So that would definitely be an incentive for everyone,
That would- yes, that's
especially
important
business
for
customers.
You're not talking about metering it though, just like by square footage of the lot or something?
It's being looked at be square footage of impervious spaces.
Right. It incentivizes people too to get rid of asphalt driveways, you know, to
Get
go to
rid of-
permeable surface, to collect the rainwater off the roof, to, you know,
I see
you
it.
can do, yeah.
I think Pike Industries would be against that.
So I think that's great. I guess the only twist on that is like if the city's gonna be using water for purposes one way or other, they probably need it. So they either have to like go to Walmart as this example or kind of claim it themselves, right? So I think that's where I was originally going, but like that
Yeah.
idea as well,
Yeah.
right?
And I think we're running low on time.
A quick question, does the city, I moved here 11 years ago, and my house came with a rain barrel. So I'm wondering if before I moved here, the city had some program where, and so since I've lived here for 11 years, I have watered my garden using that rain barrel, and it's awesome. Is there an opportunity?
I was gonna ask about bringing that back too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this comes up, and, you know, we're now just through our current budget cycle, so I think the next budget cycle, we can look into what it can take to do that again. That was a grant, and then they sold them at cost, so they were very inexpensive, and a lot of people
That's a great.
purchased.
Yeah.
Does that barrel take care of all your irrigation?
Yeah, for my garden,
That's
it does.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'd love to take that cost up in the water bill.
Yeah. And I've got a neighbor that has 3 or 4 of them. They have every single downspout from their house
Yeah.
goes into a rain barrel, different corners of their property.
I have a neighbor who does that too.
Yeah.
You don't live on Cass Street, do you?
No.
I was wondering if it was the same neighbor.
We
I
don't
went
go
up.
through them that fast, but
I was
every
about to say.
55-gallon drum we empty, we'll give to whoever wants to convert it to a rain barrel.
I've already claimed one.
Oh, really? Ooh.
Yeah.
How do you get on that list?
File through it, just send me an email, let me know.
Better yet, stop by the store.
Actually, I think that just real quick, I think Newburyport or someone did that, where they kind of explained the little converter kit, and they
Yeah.
were working with local businesses like that, so they were kind of, it was basically free rain barrel, and you had to pay whatever, $25 for the kit, but you can buy like a few, maybe get a Home Depot, so.
Yeah, they're super easy. I made a few as a raffle for an Earth Day event, so like, the kit was like 25 or 35 bucks. The Eco Club, decorated a couple for me, and a preschool decorated a couple for me, and then we gave the proceeds to the Blue Ocean Society. But
Nice.
if anybody wants a 55-gallon drum, when they come up, I'll let you know. You're welcome to have them.
All right, so to close out, because we had a very packed meeting today, our question is something like, what is something that's you're taking away from this meeting? We'll start.
Sure. So I'm going to cheat, and I'm gonna go with my takeaway from the previous meeting and do a quick report back. That last meeting I attended, I was asked about recycling downtown, and I did ask the DPW about it, and you are correct that there are no longer recycling barrels downtown, which is a good thing, because so many people, they would go by and they would either put trash in the recycling, or it was just wishful recycling, where they thought something was recyclable. So the contamination rate was incredibly high. It wasn't worth anyone's time to have separate recycling barrels downtown, unfortunately. So I guess that's not a takeaway, that's my takeaway from the previous meeting and providing that information back.
Was there any kind of signage on those barrels saying like these items only? I don't remember.
People just don't.
Yeah.
We tried that at the high school. That went horribly.
They've had different signs from their originally, I shouldn't say originally, when I moved here, they had these beautiful casings on them, to recently they had signs on every single one saying what was allowed and what wasn't allowed.
Didn't help.
Didn't help.
What I'm taking away is, this is the largest group of people I've seen at a sustainability committee meeting. And what I take away from that is, we're always talking about accelerating and scaling. We are an example of that.
I think I'm taking away, at least my mind is sort of running this whole meeting on social media and community outreach, engagement stuff, just different ideas that we can start working on, because it seems like we gotta really make a jump on that before we can even publish the RFP. But yeah, community engagement, social media. Sam Evans Brown, I love Outside In. Can't wait to go to 3S next week. Yeah, no, I'm excited. There's lots of stuff to do, but it sounds like we can get it all done.
What I'm taking away from this meeting is combination of things. First, the young people sitting in the back row up there to stay engaged and stay patient. And I'm happy to see them here along with Chris. The other thing I'm taking away is the amount of work that you guys are all doing on a community action plan, climate action plan. It's really great to be able to sit here and listen to all the work that you've done. Well, I take some of the credit for it.
I too was gonna say that climate action plan is my big takeaway. And psyched about the conversation about water conservation as well. Definitely work to do there.
My takeaway is community power. I have my 2 tickets reserved, and I can't wait to see what's going on.
My takeaway is I'm new to the committee. This is my first meeting. I'm very energized and excited to be on the committee and to help make a difference.
Yeah, and I'm ready to take some of these ideas and see what we can implement, so. I kind of sit in a chair where, like, ideas can actually, you know, go forward to some degree, so looking forward to that. Thanks.
Going back to the same.
I think I took away just how much this committee really like puts in the work to like help climate.
Scan it and send it.
Yeah, thanks, I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was gonna say, and also how much you also care about the public opinion and kind of engaging the community of Portsmouth, as we're all kind of close knit.
Yeah, I was, not that I'm skeptical, but it's nice to hear how much is happening from people that are obviously very committed to making this city in particular, not comparing it against other cities, but making Portsmouth a more sustainable place for the next 400 years, hopefully. And also I'm excited, like, we tackle a lot of real world stuff, climate change, but we also did solutions to plastic pollution. I used to do a household water survey where they would inventory how much water they use, so I'll bring that back next year. But we're teaching a lot of the stuff that this council is also addressing, which is just really refreshing to know.
I'm excited to continue the water conversation. You know, Brian's been a great partner throughout, and he and I have been kind of emailing over the last couple of months. But like, when's a good time to bring this up? And you know, it was great to hear about some of the bigger plans that Portsmouth is proposing, coming on both fronts there, and you know, maybe some of these kind of small, medium, or large projects can also come into play.
Yeah, I'm taking, I think I've always been in the smaller microcosms of projects, and it's cool to see a little bit bigger picture of it and see how they all fit together and learn a little bit more about the dynamics that are at B to make things happen, or how that process works. So just learning.
I think I'm taking away community as well, community engagement, and hopefully that means it continues with Chris and the 2 of you and any other students who are interested in being a part of that as well. Because for me, having little kiddos, the future is definitely always a huge takeaway for me.
Yeah, I'm thinking about community and engagement also, and, you know, the platforms I spoke about, they're really about, I think the word is gamification, you know, because the platform is lively, interactive, so it's kind of fun.
I think we have a unanimous thread running through the CAP subcommittee. Very excited to see you guys here tonight. Chris, thank you for everything y'all are doing. Darrell, you and your team, we've been so deep in the weeds, I think, in the details of the CAP for the last couple of months. Now I'm thinking about, okay, how do we get this out to more people, especially those of you that are not willing to take no for an answer. Okay, you too. So very excited about that, but we got to do more of it.
I have a takeaway and I have a request. So my takeaway is plastic-free July. I'm super excited about that. I didn't have that on my radar, now it is. And the request is from the young people in the room. one of the goals of the city council is to engage more youth in what we're doing at a city level. And this committee has always served as kind of an example of that, because Eco Club is active in this committee, and it's one of the only committees where we have young people involved. So, think about ways that young people can get more involved in what we're doing at the city, and send your suggestions to the city council. You can just go on the website and click, email the city council. Here's some suggestions for the way youth can get involved in the city.
My takeaway, well, specifically, I didn't think about the whole runoff from the house and using it to water gardens and whatnot. So I'm definitely gonna tell my mom about that, because she has a big garden, and I think that would be a great way. I never really thought about that. Another thing is just thank you guys for coming back there. I once was way younger and was sitting here for my first time and was really scared to talk. So I promise you, everybody in here cares about what we have to say, and it gets easier. But hopefully, join Eco Club next year. And I think that's. What's next meeting? Next meeting is July 28th.
And Josh will be
I'll be the
the
moderator.
Kate?
And
Kate?
I think it is,
Is it me?
yes.
Okay, I'm
Note
double checking that I'm
taker.
here.
Yeah. And thanks for doing a great job of facilitating.
Thank you. Usually I've been right here to help me.
Having
Now you've proven you can do it.
the summary, I think